Before he passed away, Johnny Carson reportedly revealed that 9 of his most well-known guests had secretly been gay. For 30 years, Carson welcomed America into his home each night, creating a sense of warmth and familiarity with Hollywood's biggest names. But behind the genial grins, the easy repartee, and the glittering stage lights, the Tonight Show legend was hiding explosive secrets that could have instantly blown the reputations of some of his most famous guests. Johnny knew everything, said a former Tonight Show producer who worked closely with him in the 1970s and 1980s. Stars visited his program, performed for viewers, and chimed in candidly about their marriage and relationships, and Carson was there smiling in the knowledge that it was all a total lie. Several of these secrets perished with him, though during his later years he grew more forthcoming with his closest friends, sharing with them the deceptions he had observed in Hollywood, specifically the real sexualities of favorite stars who had lived their lives concealed beneath studio-created marriages and carefully constructed public facades. Among his most shocking admissions was the reality regarding America's beloved romance leading man, the leading heartthrob who sat opposite Carson repeatedly, discussing his marriage while dreading constant anxiety that one direct question could reveal his whole life as a studio creation. Carson also knew the secret about a legendary Hollywood star couple whose 26-year romance was celebrated as one of the greatest love affairs in cinema history, although it was, in fact, a compromise that enabled the two to keep their authentic sexual orientations hidden from a censorious public. Such secrets were matters of life and death, not just hearsay or snippets of gossip during those times. A single revelation might end a career, bring disgrace, or lead to criminal prosecution. The burden of this weight weighed on Carson increasingly as he aged and thought about his legacy. Yet before diving into those reflections, one particular story stood out. The story of how one of America's most adored leading men lived a double life through a carefully constructed studio lavender marriage, terrified that one wrong moment on television could expose him. That man was Rock Hudson, the heartthrob with a fake wife. To tens of millions of women in the 1950s and 60s, Rock Hudson was the ideal man, tall, handsome, and supremely charming. He was one of the most bankable romantic leads in Hollywood, frequently teamed with Doris Day in frothy comedies that helped solidify his status as the quintessential straight man. The irony was astonishing, recalled a veteran Tonight Show writer who had overheard Carson's off-the-record musings. Johnny would sit there interviewing the man every woman in America dreamed of, well aware that Hudson's straight image was a well-guarded veneer created to mask his homosexuality. Hudson made multiple visits to The Tonight Show, mesmerizing viewers with his wit and Tinseltown tales. Yet behind the scenes, each visit was fraught for both men. Carson had known Hudson was homosexual, an open secret among Hollywood high-ups, according to a former NBC executive, but he also knew the ruinous effects that disclosure would have. Every interaction between them was a tense pas de deux, each man painfully aware of the treacherous ground they traversed. The pressure on Hudson was crushing. While character actors who might be able to survive rumors about their personal lives, his success relied completely on his charm toward women who were willing to suspend the heterosexual fantasy that Universal Studios had so painstakingly constructed. This was not merely a matter of preserving privacy. It was a matter of survival. Hudson's agent, Henry Wilson, carefully managed his client's personal life in every detail, including arranging a marriage to his own secretary, Phyllis Gates, to quell persistent gossip. The marriage did not last long, 3 years between 1955 and 1958, but it did serve its purpose of guarding Hudson's reputation. Carson, in private, frequently spoke of how shocked he was by such so-called lavender marriages, calling them institutionalized dishonesty in the Hollywood system. Though he never condemned anyone for whom they were, he was troubled by the extreme deception involved in keeping up these illusions. As someone whose career was founded on interviews and honesty, being a participant in those fictions bothered him more than most folks understood. Hudson's dual existence came to a tragic end in 1985 when he died as a result of AIDS complications, one of the first big celebrities to die of the disease. His death, and the reality that came with it, brought about a reckoning he had put off for so long. Carson was deeply saddened by the tragedy. Another Tonight Show producer later told how Johnny felt that Hudson had been caught in an unfair system that refused him the freedom to live truthfully. Carson was left increasingly uncomfortable about his own complicity in all those public deceptions. This struggle between private reality and public reputation still nagged Carson's conscience, particularly whenever he remembered another Hollywood icon, Cary Grant. Cary Grant personified sophistication and allure for decades. With his urbane accent, smooth style, and on-screen romances, he was the ultimate man about town, an image that still holds sway today. Carson greatly admired Grant, yet he was amazed at how dramatically at odds the private life of the actor was with his glamorous public image. What most intrigued Carson was Grant's extended history with actor Randolph Scott, the tough star of westerns. For more than a decade, the two shared a Santa Monica beach house known informally as Bachelor Hall, an arrangement that was well understood but publicly deflected. Johnny once said it was surreal, recalled a Tonight Show writer. He'd interview Grant about his 5 marriages to women, knowing all the while about his domestic arrangements with Scott. Photos of the time had Grant and Scott preparing meals, working out, or reclining in robes, shots that today would unmistakably show a couple. However, the studios at the time staged them as 2 bachelor friends living together. Grant's 5 marriages are today widely acknowledged by film historians as being quintessential lavender marriages. Marriages staged to preserve a heterosexual facade but hiding same-sex relationships. Carson has said to have sympathized very much with the emotional weight that this would have entailed. He recognized that Cary Grant was not just a name, but an artfully crafted identity through which Archibald Leach, the person behind it, could exist in an intolerant world. Although Carson never spoke out publicly about Grant's homosexuality, he confided to friends and family years later that he regretted his involvement in Hollywood's machinery of deceit. The interviews, publicity, and constant stories that contributed to perpetuating disinformation. He began to consider The Tonight Show part of the same system that compelled stars like Grant to lead inauthentic lives. This conflict between image and reality surfaced once more in Carson's reflections on one of Hollywood's most iconic duos, Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, whose alleged 26-year affair was one of the movie's great love stories. For years, their relationship was seen by the public as a testament to their love, a long-term affair that endured in spite of Tracy's refusal to free his wife. In private, however, Carson told friends that their love was something far more complicated than the popular myth. Carson had interviewed Hepburn several times and admired her enormously, but he was intrigued by how widely the world had embraced a version of her life that concealed the truth. An afterthought, Carson stated that the Hepburn-Tracy relationship was generally a mutually advantageous arrangement, one that protected both from prying conjectures about their sexual lives. For Tracy, he told a friend, it afforded moral cover, a means for a Catholic man to live apart from his wife without imperiling his reputation. For Hepburn, it furnished a socially respectable explanation for her independence and choice never to wed. Carson had long observed that Hepburn's longest and closest relationships were with women. She had cohabited for years with her partner Laura Harding, and afterwards shared a decades-long relationship with Phyllis Wilburn, whom some biographers asserted she even called her wife. To Carson, the most remarkable thing was how Hollywood had turned what was essentially a close friendship and working partnership into the greatest love story of the century. It was probably the most successful piece of myth-making in Hollywood history, said a historian who had spoken with Carson. Tracy's drinking and constant disappearances allowed Hepburn to do as she pleased, and her commitment to him at his time of passing cemented the public's faith in their epic romance. In the end, the romance served both stars well, providing them with privacy and protection and building a myth so strong that it still outshines reality. Carson used to admire Hepburn's power to manage her own persona. Instead of faking romances, she just moved away from Hollywood society, building a secluded universe in Connecticut and New York. The Tracy romance allowed them to give perfect alibis for that independence. Carson regarded Hepburn's handling of her persona as one of the brightest moves during Hollywood's heyday. She didn't battle the system, he once said to a friend. She outwitted it. By presenting herself as tough-minded and cerebral, Hepburn dodged much of the supermarket tabloid attention that engulfed her contemporaries. The Tracy legend was an ideal cover story, so vaunted that no one doubted it. Privately, Carson was intrigued and appalled by this cycle of deception. To Carson, Hollywood didn't only make movies, it manufactured people, narratives, and identities constructed upon performance. Every interview, every magazine feature, and every studio publicity piece was part of a huge machine that convinced the public to believe in characters that shared little with the actual human beings beneath. As he aged, Carson reflected more deeply on the human cost of those deceptions. It wasn't just about money, he told one confidant. It was about survival. These people couldn't be themselves, not even for a second. He recognized how fear governed Hollywood. The fear of exposure, disgrace, or loss. One revelation could end a career instantly. With time, Carson grew to understand himself as witness and collaborator in those falsehoods. He had spoken to tens of thousands of stars playing their public part, contributing to the illusion by never going beyond certain boundaries. While keeping their secrets, he would at times wonder if silence was complicity in their pain. By the 1980s, as Hollywood started dealing with its own past and social mores began to change, Carson confided in friends that he experienced both guilt and sympathy. Observing stars such as Rock Hudson live and die confined by the system put a profound impact on him. He spent an entire life surrounded by actors' love for their public image, but consumed by secret realities they could never share. He wasn't upset at their secrets, remembered one Tonight Show producer. He was upset at the system that required them to hide it. Carson frequently mused that the greatest success in Hollywood was not its movies. It was that Hollywood could redefine reality. What had originated as studio hype had become cultural legend, and even the stars began to believe their own myths. In his later life, Carson's musings showed a man who had peered behind each facade and realized how much the price was to wear one. For him, Hollywood's glistening exterior was both beautiful and poignant, a place where dreams came true only if the truth remained entombed. At the end of his life, he spoke not with bitterness but with regret, seeing that the cinematic golden age had been constructed upon the suffering of those who were never allowed to live their true lives. As he explained to a longtime acquaintance, everyone wanted the illusion, the studios, the fans, the networks. We all helped build it. But behind every perfect smile, there was someone terrified that the truth might come out.